So I recently did an on-location portrait using existing light plus one additional LED light. And I thought this would be good to share with my YouTube subscribers. So thank you, by the way, for being a subscriber. And when I left that day, usually I take along a small bag that I put in here, my iPad usually, sometimes a smaller iPod. And I usually put in here a smaller camera. Not too often I take along the Nikons, but a smaller mirrorless Fuji. This is the XM1. This is what I had with me that day. And then I also take along, usually I'll put this in my bag too. This is a video light. And this is the CN126. I believe it's made by Near. And in my particular case, the one I'm using, it's got a frosted cover on here. This is the only thing that I had with me that day. And I usually would have used a reflector, but I didn't drive that day. We were visiting a cigar shop that we frequent on Saturdays, and somebody else drove, so I didn't have the reflectors with me, so I had to use the LED light. So when I did this portrait, this was the only gear that I had with me, because usually if I'm on an assignment on location, I'll take along several, maybe 2 or 3 bags consisting of all my camera gear, lighting equipment, light stands, a tripod, and usually a large softbox, or sometimes I'll use an umbrella. So this is actually a big difference than what I would usually take to do a portrait. But I was still able to get a nice portrait using very minimal equipment. The first thing that I look for is the lighting. So as we take a look at the room here, we do have plenty of light here, nice soft lighting. And I had 2 things in my favor that I really like. The one thing is we have a lot of light coming in from the left side where you can see the doors, the clear doors, and up above there's a huge window. So we have nice light coming in that way. In fact, I could have actually used that light. I could have changed his position, but instead I was using that light coming in at that angle as a kicker light, meaning it was throwing a little bit of light on the edge of his face just to add a little bit more dimension to the photograph. So I noticed that we had some nice spotlights overhead also. So I sat them down underneath the spotlight. So that was our main light that we use, giving us a nice spotlight effect. Many times you see these old photographs back in the 1930s of glamour shots or Hollywood celebrities, and that's what they used, a lot of spotlight effects. So that spotlight was our main light. So if you look at this image coming from the camera, notice that our subject had a hat on. One of the reasons that I wanted to use this LED light was because of the hat. The subject had on a larger, well, kind of a large brim hat that actually casts a small shadow in the eyes underneath, over by the forehead. So I wanted to lighten that up. So I had somebody hold this, and this, by the way, is adjustable. So that's the neat thing about it. I can just adjust the amount of light that I need, and of course I can move it closer and further back. But I had somebody hold this, not quite 45 degrees to my side, maybe a little bit less than 45 degrees, and I was able to light up the area underneath the hat, plus I was also able to put a catch light in the eyes. And using our Fuji XM1 along with the kit lens, which is a 16 to 50 millimeter, I had it set at 50 millimeter, and the largest I can open it up was 5.6, so I was kind of limited. So I wanted a little bit more background blur. So what I did was, in Photoshop, I selected the background, added a little bit of Gaussian blur to the background. So even though I didn't use a really super fast lens, like a 1.4 lens or even a 1.2, I could only use 5.6. So I added a little bit of blur to it and also added a little bit of a vignette all the way around the image. And then next, adding a little bit more of a vignette and just adding to that spotlight effect. And then using some post-processing techniques, just gave it a little bit of an unusual contrast effect and color. And this also made for a nice brown tone effect. and then adding a slight texture to it, which we put on more to the background. And I noticed that if we crop this a little bit closer, it's also a nice effect in color and also a nice effect in black and white. And then using the sepia, the brown tone. And notice that if you look close, you can see that little shadow on his nose. As we're looking, it's on the right-hand side. And of course, that's caused by the shadow from the LED light, which I had someone holding to my left. And another image as it looks coming straight from the camera. And as you look, you could see to our left, you could see the kicker light coming in, adding a little bit of shape to the left side of his face as we're looking at it. And then adding a little bit more blur to the background and a little bit of vignetting to the edges. We come up with this. And then again, adding even more vignetting. And again, making it into a black and white with more of a high contrast effect. And here's another one coming from the camera. You'll notice that you could see the humidors on display here. And I think that was what I wanted, was part of it to show that he's in a cigar shop holding a cigar. It's about to light up. So this was the cigar shop, by the way, that I frequent. Usually once a week we get together with some friends. And maybe like for a couple hours we talk and we solve all the world's problems in 2 hours. It's a lot of fun. And then we take this image, crop it a little bit closer also, get a neat, interesting composition. And again, you could see the kicker light coming in from our left. And again, notice that shadow caused by the LED light coming in from our left. And you can see the catch lights in the eyes here too. And then making up a slight higher contrast black and white. And then also a sepia tone. And again, using post-processing techniques, we come up with this effect here. So the next time you go out with minimal equipment, just remember you can still do a great job in case somebody were to ask you to do a portrait or maybe it's something else. One of the most important things to look for is the lighting. Learn to see light, and if you have to, you can add to it, whether it's through a reflector or like I did using a small LED light. So just keep it simple, watch the lighting, and you'll come up with a great portrait. Thank you very much.